Welcome to episode 5 of You Are Not Your Diagnosis. Today's episode will feature our special guest, Andrea Arledge. Andrea is a former registered nurse who is on a mission to do healthcare differently by helping her clients address their health using a holistic approach. She's a certified holistic nutritionist, Reiki master teacher, conscious coach, and certified brain game facilitator. You can find her at Elements Integrative Wellness, and we'll have a link to her website in the show notes. When I first met Andrea a couple months ago, and we had a conversation about the unique challenges of living with chronic illness, as she herself is someone who lives with type 1 diabetes. I wanted to have her on the show to have a conversation about her own experience of living with chronic illness, as well as her unique perspective on the benefits of Western medicine and some of the downfalls of the system. I'm excited to share with you this interview with Andrea now. And welcome to the show, Andrea.
Hello.
I'm so excited to chat with you.
I know, me too. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your own health history and your experience with chronic illness. Let's start there.
Okay.
Like, big topic, right?
I know. It's like where to start. So when I was 15, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I remember, honestly, I knew what it was because my grandmother had type 1 diabetes. And I knew the symptoms, and it was horrible. I'll just say that. But when I went to the doctor, they told me, I went to the emergency room and they told me immediately what it was because my blood sugar was like 326 or something like that. And the normal range is 60 to 120. And that was all well and good. Well, then I go, not well and good, but it was what it was. Yeah. And I knew what it was. And of course I was so scared. My mom was so scared. I mean, imagine your 15-year-old child being diagnosed with this, right? And so I go to an endocrinologist, and that's where I was traumatized. So the endocrinologist told me that I wouldn't live a long life. She told me this, like, you won't live a long life, and you shouldn't have children. And if you do have children, you need to have them really young. And so she put that, in my mind. I mean, she scared me. I mean, of course, she put the fear of death in my mind. And at 15,
that's a big thing to take in,
right? At any age, but for somebody who's still got all the hormones brewing, all of the things that we go through, especially as women. Well, and that totally traumatized me. So I ended up doing a lot of self-sabotage and didn't take care of myself. Ended up having a child at 18 because in the back of my mind I thought that I'm not gonna be able to have a child. So best thing that ever happened to me, but I was a baby raising a baby.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
you didn't have a lot of life experience. You were just
no,
technically an adult, but not really,
but not really. Yeah. And so, I lived in so much fear for so many years. And I remember when I was 21, I, decided to go to nursing school. And I thought, that's the only way that I just knew in my heart of hearts that was the only way I was going to heal, was to be able to help other people heal. And so my initial reason for going to nursing school was absolutely to be like a diabetes educator. That never happened. In my path in nursing took a I ended up in leadership basically the whole time, which was fine too. I learned so much about myself. And, but there were so many years that lived in fear, and that I lived in fear. And then, it really, gosh, I mean, where do I start? I mean, it's like, where do you go from there? There was a lot of coming into just being a nurse, and that is when I started to heal. It is. And so I knew that was part of my path. And when I say heal, there is no cure, right, for type 1 diabetes.
Right.
As of yet.
Right. As of yet.
as of yet. And right. And I'm trying to figure out like where I was going with that because I just lost my train of thought. But it was very much healing for me to be a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Western medicine.
Yes, yes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because you have, a unique experience of having, lived in that world, and now, you've kind of stepped out of that role as a nurse and
Mm-hmm.
kind of are more in the world of holistic and alternative medicine versus.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I saw, what, and I don't want to ever bash Western medicine. Western medicine is what keeps me alive, and I'm so grateful for it. But there's a way to deliver, a diagnosis.
Yes.
And that was way back then, and I know that things are so different now for young people who get diagnosed and things like that. But that was my experience, and it was very traumatic, and I held that for so many years. I didn't even realize, Lynn,
how traumatic it was.
Yeah, exactly. I did not know that I had medical trauma.
Mm-hmm. And I think so many people do. I think you're bringing up a beautiful point. Many people who have chronic illness have some sort of trauma around that, but we don't even realize it because, it's not really talked about in a way, I mean, Western medicine certainly doesn't think of it that way. It's
no.
Okay, you were just given that diagnosis and, it's kind of just the facts in a way, here you go. This is what we figured out is wrong. Here's our plan of treatment for you. But what happens, to the person after that? I mean, that was a big part of my own story as well, was really that impact that moment of hearing that news and how the news is delivered too is so impactful, as you said, like telling somebody at 15, you're never going to live a long life. Like that is
right. I mean, that's huge. I'll have dreams sometimes, and this has been many years since my last dream. But I would have dreams that I went back just to tell her, like, don't do that, to people. And she was a pediatric endocrinologist.
Wow,
a
so
pediatric.
That was her specialty, to work with kids going through this, and that. Can you imagine how many were impacted too by that?
That was my point. Saying that, like, that was
If that was her way probably of delivering the news to most people, was just like, here, I'm going to scare the crap out of you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I remember she did say, this is a person who is organized. This disease, like this is a responsible person's disease. At 15, and I'm like,
what does that even mean? Like,
explain that to me, please, because I don't understand what a responsible person's disease means. So she really had me confused. She really just had me like all up in sorts. And my mom, thank God for my mom, because my grandmother was diabetic too, so she already knew. She had to give my grandmother shots before.
I was going to ask if it was her mom when you met.
It was her mother, and so it was very traumatic for her. So way back when, they would make you come to the outpatient center, or basically it was the emergency room, to come to learn how to give yourself shots. And so I did it like on an orange, and then they made me practice with saline. And saline under the skin burns. Mm-hmm. It burns. And I thought, I had that in my head, like, this is what it's going to feel like every time I give myself a shot. And now, mind you, I was on, in the beginning, it was 2 shots a day before I went to an insulin pump, which we could talk about that too. But I was taking 6 shots a day, and so I just thought, if this is how it's going to feel every time, I just want to die. Right. That was my mindset for many, many years.
Right. How can I live with this? And nobody really told you that it was the saline that made it painful. They just were like,
no, they didn't even explain that. But again, this was way back then. I don't even know how they teach people now. I feel very far removed from, because it's been 4 years since I left my nursing career, but I feel a little bit removed from that aspect about, how they do that. But I am quite sure it's not that way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you would think that would just be something you would say to someone is, like we're practicing with saline, so you get the technique. It's going to be a little painful, but the insulin itself isn't going to burn this way.
Insulin does not burn.
So that you're not like fearful that that's going to be the, what your experience is. I mean, it's little things.
Exactly. And to add to that, so the day that I had to go to the outpatient center to be taught how to do that, my mom gave me my shot, we're about to leave, and she passed out because she was so worried about me. She's like, oh my gosh, this is my baby. And I've watched my own mother go through this, and it's not easy.
Right.
Like, this is a minute by minute, literally. Like, if I ran out of insulin, I could die in a matter of like a day. I mean, it's that serious. Right. And so, so she gave me my shot, passed out, and ends up in the emergency room at the same time. and she was fine. It was just like a vagal response where she just held her breath, and
she just got too stressed. And, but then that's, again, traumatic for you at 15, and
I know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is affecting my mother. And then
was she gonna pass out every time?
Mother, I need you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it traumatized the whole family. Everybody was really worried. I had lost a lot of weight, like a lot of weight, and that was part of how I knew, what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of had some symptoms that led you to that, but I think that, what your story so illustrates, and what I hear from so many is just that lack of understanding of, how news is delivered and how people are, given instructions, like in that case, learning how to give yourself the shots. How much that would have made a difference. So I think that's helpful for people who are listening to know, if you've had those experiences. First of all, trauma is not uncommon in this process of being given a diagnosis. And second, you're not alone in having had a traumatic experience, or, wishing that it was different in terms of how, news was delivered, or how you were educated about certain parts of the process.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I had to really unpack a lot of that and unwind a lot of that. And it's, I pat myself on the back, honestly, because I've listened to my path. I've listened, to being a nurse and to doing the hard work, being a single mother, and again, thank God for my own mother that helped me through that process too. And I would have never been where I am now. But yeah, it's just a long road to really getting your mind wrapped around, number one, the diagnosis.
Yes.
And the life that you have to live.
Right.
With type 1 diabetes anyway.
Right. But with many things, with many people, whether you're listening and you have type 1 diabetes, or you have something else that's, a chronic thing, like it's chronic. And it's also, the thing I talk about in my book is nobody really gives you an instruction manual after, like, they deliver the news of, like, here's how to start, adjusting your life or coming to terms.
That is such a good point.
Or how to heal. It's just kind of like, okay, here's the news, and then what?
Then what?
Yeah, you're kind of left feeling like
diagnosis. Go figure it out.
Yeah. This is what we're going to do for you, is give you this particular medication and that medication, and we'll see you in a month or 3 months or however long the follow-up is. So you have this sense of, like, here's kind of the treatment, but the bigger perspective of it, how do you start living your life from that place?
Yes, because I was scared. I was really scared. So with type 1 diabetes anyway, you go through a period, or with type 1, you can go through what's called a honeymoon phase. And I was still in my honeymoon phase, so my pancreas was working just a little bit. And I would get low blood sugar because they have to figure out the right dose of medications and things like that too. So it's just, oh, what a balancing act. So I was really scared to, like, live, like, go exercise because I've got to get low blood sugar.
Right.
And so, and that sometimes will still, I mean, it is
still there.
I still have to think about, yes, and be really careful and mindful of that. So,
but there was probably no real education around like kind of what to expect in terms, and what.
Not right off the bat.
Yeah.
Not at all. And that's, it's still that finding harmony. I try to stay away from the word balance, the personal thing there, because it feels like the ever elusive thing, I'm always reaching for balance, but to really keep my blood sugars in harmony, in balance, in the right range, is, it's that balancing act. It really is. I mean, there's kind of no way around that word.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about kind of what made you decide to leave that nursing career. What was kind of the catalyst in your story of that?
So, all right. So there were 7 years of my 17-year nursing career that I was a nursing supervisor, like the last 2 years of that. The last years were in a different role, being more in like corporate career. So I got really burnt out as a nursing supervisor. I loved it. I learned so much about myself, but I saw when the politics in a hospital, that, I mean, it's like people are numbers. And I don't want to scare people when I say that. You have to be your own advocate. That is for sure.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about that today.
Yes. Sure. Okay, good. Because that is very important for people to hear. Now, as a nurse, we were trained to be a patient advocate. So that is really a nurse's role. Know that, people that are listening to this, your nurse is supposed to be your advocate. And she is the one who is supposed to stand up to the doctor. And, she doesn't agree with something. Of course, she has to follow doctor's orders, but sometimes she does not agree with those orders. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the doctors even ask us, well, what would you do? Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of that. And there was a lot of the politics, and that's coming from, again, me being a nursing supervisor, seeing all of those politics and dealing with numbers, me doing like productivity and things like that. So seeing really what went on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Like, because I worked in, let me give you a little bit of context. I worked in peri-op. So, and I did like the testing for people that were going to have surgery. Mm-hmm. And I did their assessments, their health assessments, made sure that they were healthy enough to have surgery. Right. They didn't have, like, if we knew that they had a heart problem or something like that, we would know what to do. Mm-hmm. So I remember being in these meetings with like my VP and my director, and them being like, okay, our numbers are down. We need to get our numbers up. And I'm sitting here thinking, how do we get numbers up for surgery? Like, do we go out and break people's legs? Like, I mean,
that seems like a very odd thing to say.
I mean, this is where my mind would be like, how do you, like,
are we supposed to go recruit people? Would you like to have surgery today?
Like having your gallbladder out today. You may feel better. I don't know. I'm just saying. No. But so there's a lot of that. And it was just numbers. And then I went into that corporate career, and then the same thing. It was all numbers. And there were so many the politics. It's just like, why? And I went into nursing to be a nurse. Well, as soon as I took that job being a nursing supervisor and kind of got away from the bedside, I feel like I wasn't a nurse really kind of anymore. I mean, in my mind, of course I was, but
you were,
and I still actually am, but I'm not going back there. So it was really the untruths. To put it simply, it was a lot of untruths, and I got really, I guess, obsessed with like the truth, like, and people weren't treated the way that they should have been treated. Like, for example, I'll tell you an example. I was recovering a patient. We were in the recovery room. They had what was called a lithotripsy for kidney stone. And I remember one of the surgeons, and I was on call, so it was after hours. And he said to me, and another nurse, because there always had to be two there, he said, Andrea, if you call me for any orders, that's a sign of weakness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he said, and I said, okay, well, I kind of got really huffy with, well, okay. So I said, I'll write the order and you can sign it tomorrow. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. But I mean, and a lot of nurses are, I mean, we're trained to do that, but we're not doctors, and we get reminded of that a lot too.
Right.
A lot of ego.
Right. And a very interesting in between position, like you're not supposed to write orders, but then.
Thank you. Yes, a very interesting, but that's a perfect way to say it, Lynn.
Yeah.
Between, because, we were definitely like the middle woman or man for patients. But I remember him saying that to me, and I just thought, wow. And I've been cussed out and over the phone by doctors. I mean, it's just, oh yeah, there's that happens. It's like, oh yeah, that's
more common than you would know, right?
And it's not normal. That's not normal. And then, even doctors being like, well, Andrea, what medication would you give? Like, what would you do? And I'm thinking,
why am I the one being asked?
Like no words.
Right.
So that was interesting.
That's not my role or responsibility. Why are you asking the question?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so it was, if I had to put it in one word though, is why did I leave? It was the untruth. And it was not, I knew that my sole purpose was not, it wasn't that. That of course was my stepping stone,
right.
But that wasn't what I was put here to do. And it made me who I am though. So I won't ever deny that part of myself,
Yeah, I mean, it was probably a very formative experience, a lot of education and training, and I'm sure it gives you a unique perspective when you're working with people too, because you understand that world in a very deep way. Mm-hmm. That many people don't have that experience of knowing, just how things work in terms of hospitals and.
Mm-hmm. So there's budgets and I know, I mean, they are, it is a business. Unfortunately, our healthcare system is a business.
Yes, it is a big business.
It is a big business. Yes, that big business, especially if you start talking about big pharma, which that could be a whole nother podcast.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we could go on for days talking about that part of the process.
Oh my gosh. So, but yeah, it was the untruths that led me to really start listening to, okay. And there was a lot of tears. Like there's actually been a lot of unwinding that I've had to do around my whole identity as a nurse and letting that go and consciously, making that decision that I'm going to leave. Mm-hmm. It was a conscious decision. I'm going to leave.
Right.
I cannot do this anymore.
Paradigm and
it's not right. This is not right. That's all this is just not right.
So what ultimately then did it kind of bring you to? I mean,
so my vision was I knew that I wanted to be a certified holistic nutritionist. And I kept, scouring over, just really finding a school that would align with me. I ultimately did a 2-year certification from the Energetic Health Institute. They're in LA, out in California. And it was an online program and it was wonderful. But we talked a lot about energetics and traditional Chinese medicine and things like that. And some Ayurvedic knowledge.
Sounds definitely really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And the energetics too, though, around how your food affects your moods.
Yes.
Food sensitivities, things like that I, as a practitioner now can do it. But, as my story unfolds, that's not what I do anymore.
It's not funny how that happens too.
Isn't it funny when you decide to listen to your soul purpose? Oh, okay, well now I'm going to go to the next stepping stone. And so the holistic nutrition, it really, I was like, wow, it led me. So once I got alkaline, I'll go ahead and say that because that's really a major principle of how I keep myself healthy now.
Healthy, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is to really make sure that I'm alkaline and the way that I eat and breathe. Oh, yes. Hello, breathing.
Yes.
So I did yoga teacher training the same time I was doing the certification for holistic nutrition. Mm-hmm. So I thought I was going to be a certified holistic nutritionist and a yoga teacher. So it was like it wasn't for the money. You know what I mean?
It was about
So,
doing some healing work and not.
yeah, I knew I needed to heal, and I didn't realize that when I actually like quit. Like I remember 2 weeks after I quit, I slept. I didn't realize how fatigued I was. I slept for like 2 weeks solid.
Wow.
And I was in adrenal fatigue, like really in a bad way, adrenal fatigue. And that took me 2 years to heal. So it was like, I feel like, I went into that. It was just amazing how it worked out because I learned how to heal myself from adrenal fatigue.
Beautiful.
Right. I know. So it happened for a reason. I did all of that for a reason. And it's to help keep me healthy now,
Mm-hmm.
And
So that you don't go back to that place of burning out and
exactly, to the burnout. And that being an entrepreneur now, that's big,
yes.
especially as somebody living with a chronic illness and the burnout and not overdoing it. And which I have a tendency sometimes to do that. Like when I'm all in, I'm all in. So hence I'm going to leave and go do 2 trainings
at the same time.
At the same time, not even give myself a break because I didn't know I needed one. That's how just go I was. And so that's basically, that was my vision.
Mm-hmm.
When I was going to leave, that was it. That was
what you wanted to do.
And I did for a while, and then realized really quickly that that was not my path because like when you're dealing with people have to be really dedicated to change their habits, especially around eating.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't have that. And I hate to use the word fight, but I didn't have that fight in me anymore to like try to convince somebody. Right. Because I felt like I was doing a lot of convincing, even though these people were coming to me going, I want to do this. I really want to find out my food sensitivities and, all of the things. And then you give them that, okay, well, you don't eat gluten because that showed up as a sensitivity. And they're like, I'm not giving up gluten.
Right. Yeah. Food is
not easy. I mean, it's not easy. Let's not sugarcoat.
Right. But there's definitely, food is such a challenging thing for so many people.
It really is. And I mean, that's a trigger for me too, being a type 1 diabetic. Like if people are always like, can you eat that? Are you supposed to be eating that? Or you don't look like you're diabetic. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to look like? What does a type 1 diabetic look like? You know?
Which I think applies to a lot of different, health conditions. People think
absolutely
you're supposed to look a certain way, or
like Lynn, you don't look like you have a chronic illness. Yeah. But what are you supposed to look like?
Yeah. Or, and that's, in my case, that's a good thing because I don't basically have symptoms on a regular basis, but for some people too, it's a struggle because they feel pain inside and nobody sees it, and then you hear stories
absolutely
of people
that
with
is
like
such a good point.
With like a handicap placard and they're getting like people criticizing them because it's like, oh, you don't look like an elderly person with a cane and
Yep. That's such a good point. I love that you said that. Yes.
It's a very difficult thing sometimes because illness can be invisible for people, and that can lead to a lot of people just not understanding.
And there's a lot of shame around that,
right, and feeling just misunderstood too, of just like nobody gets what going through.
Time. There were so many years that I was like, I am so alone. I am so alone.
Yes.
And even this is, I mean, I'm 43 now. I don't mind sharing my age at all. The Instagram has a beautiful type 1 diabetes community. I don't know about, I mean, obviously that's my thing, because that's what I live with, but I'm sure there's the Instagram. I found a beautiful community of type 1 diabetic. Yeah.
Interesting.
And even then, I mean, it made me feel like, oh, well, I'm not alone.
Right.
Yeah. And so
it's a big part of the healing journey too, to feel like there's people who understand, who can support, you can share resources too.
Absolutely. That was a big one, sharing resources.
Things that are helping, because a lot of times, it's like, otherwise you're just experimenting and inventing the wheel like, all over again. And sometimes somebody is like, oh, you know, when I did this thing, it really helped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really empowering to have that ability and to feel like you can pass it on too. When something has helped you, you know, it's like you can help other people as well.
Yeah. It's horrible, like watching people think that they're alone in any illness, you know,
Yes.
much less
Yes.
just loneliness, period. You know, loneliness actually is a diagnosis now. They can use that as a diagnosis now.
That's interesting. And I think it is so true. We live in a world
It
that
is
can
true.
become very isolated, and, you know, and loneliness affects your health, you know.
And that makes things even worse. It's like there's that circle, you know, this domino effect. Yeah.
Yep. So not feeling alone is very powerful. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of why I think having other people share their stories so that, you know, listeners will know that they're not alone, you know, even if it's not the same diagnosis, you have some commonalities of what you're.
Yeah. So I like living with something every day.
Yes.
And
I like to say healing from something every day.
Healing from something. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that reframe. I love that. Healing from something every day.
Because I always like to hold that possibility there too, you know.
Yeah. Me too. And a lot of people, I love that you said that, because a lot of people are like, well, you know, when you start talking about type 1 diabetes and people, and I'm just talking about type 1 diabetes, like there's not a cure. And people are like, well, they don't understand, you know, that there's not. Well, that's type 2. You can just change your diet and things like that. And that's simply not true at this point. Right. That does not mean. So I try to stay in that miracle consciousness.
Right.
Anything is possible.
Right.
Look how far we've come.
Yes.
Even with the way that I treat myself now, that I have what's called an artificial pancreas. And so it's an insulin pump, but it has another sensor. So I have 2 sites in my belly actually right now that one is a sensor, and it tells my pump what my blood sugar is.
Wow. So you don't even have to do the testing.
Well, you still have to calibrate like maybe 2 or 3 times a day. And then, I mean, it's beautiful because it gives you insulin based on what you're. Yeah, so it's kind of scary because it's like, oh, that it's a little AI,
right?
You know,
if it turns bad and
it decides to give me too much insulin, but it's beautiful. Like the technology, like things have come a long way.
Yeah, I can imagine that it improves quality of life so much because you're not constantly like having to manage it and, you know, adjust it. You know, as you go about your day and you're in the middle of something, it can adjust. And help your body. And that's one of the cases again where, you know, it's like you said, not bashing Western medicine because that keeps you alive, and that technology is amazing because you're able to live life and be doing other things without constantly going, I wonder what my numbers are and do I need to adjust what I'm doing.
Right. But in this this is bringing something to mind here. When I was 35, been 8 years. So talking timeline here. And it didn't stop me. Like I used to wouldn't have done the things that I'm about to tell you that I did. But I rock climbed Lower Yosemite Falls.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought, you know, I'd never, and it was, I live with a rock climber. So he, of course, got me rock climbing.
Right.
And but you know, coming from a mindset of like, I'm going to die, or like,
right. I'm going to die
every year, Lynn, every year when I remember being like 21, I would be like, I'm alive. Like, especially on the major milestones too. Like, I'm 25 and I'm still alive. I'm alive. So, I mean, it's like every day I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm alive. You know, I try to stay in that mindset
of excitement and
like I'm alive. And imagine hitting 30, 35, 40, and I'm just still like, I'm alive. I mean, I didn't, you know, and looking back on my life, so talking about like not being your diagnosis and not allowing that mindset to really take over you, because it can. It can.
For sure.
I mean, like half the battle, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that was episode 2 was all about, what does it mean not to be your diagnosis? So I'm
Oh,
curious what your short answer to that is, what does it mean to you not to be your diagnosis?
oh, it's to not identify, not to identify in that body.
Yes.
Like, telling, it's my mindset. I had to work a lot, and that's why my career has shifted again. So now I work with people about mindset. But this is, when I climbed Lower Yosemite Falls, I was like, I did that. And a lot of it was to get over my fear of heights too. But still, it was so I like to hike. We like to do a lot of hiking, and that's one way that I help myself now, to stay healthy. And so I, up in the Tetons, did this. It was like the most beautiful, but what word do I want to use? It was the most intense hike. I was painful. It was painful. But anyway, so we hike up into the Tetons, up into this lake. It's called Surprise Lake. And it is so worth it.
Too. I grew up near.
You did?
Yeah, but it's not a hike. I don't think I've ever done that particular one.
It's pretty intense. Yeah, I think you gain like 3,000 or 4,000 feet in elevation in about 3 or 4 miles.
Wow.
I remember. Yeah, and I had 35 pounds on my back because we're backpacking and we're staying up there.
Okay.
So, just proving to myself, like, I did need to prove to myself that I could do that because I had gotten older and I wasn't as active. And so that was another reason why I did like yoga teacher training too, but that was all about my mind and my body,
right,
and my spirit. But staying really active and proving to myself too that I didn't have to believe her. That was part of my unpacking. And that was so healing to like prove to myself that I could actually do something that I thought I would never be able to. And I'm not saying everybody who has a chronic illness, go rock climb.
But that was what it was. Yeah.
I would say do something to like challenge yourself to get out of, if you're spiraling down.
Yes.
Into that.
Or feeling really stuck.
Yeah.
It is.
Do something to just shift that energy, I mean, like I said, I live with this every day, and I know you do too. And that's part. I mean, we have to deal with our minds every day.
For sure.
And our bodies,
Yes, but the mind is so huge, and that's definitely a big part of, topics here on the podcast is all about how we're thinking about things.
I love your work. I knew when we talked, I was like, she is important to the planet.
Oh, thank you. And so are you.
Well, thank you. Yes. So, gosh, I could say so much. There's, I don't know.
Yes.
Did you have another question? I mean, there's so much.
For sure. There's so much. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours and definitely have much more to impart. But yeah, there were a few other things that I wanted to make sure that we kind of talked about.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I think one of the big things, and I think we connected initially over this topic, was kind of the feeling of, do doctors ever listen? So I'd love to hear a little bit of your experience, both personally as a patient, and then also kind of from that perspective of the nurse. Like, how well do you think doctors listen? Because this is something I hear all the time. It's like,
okay, so this was a big problem for me. So being naturally an empathetic person, they teach you that in nursing school too. We had to like put adult diapers on each other to feel what it felt like to be stripped of that, your autonomy and things like that. So we were trained to be the advocates. And I will say, as a nurse, I put my hand up and say I was a damn good nurse. I really was. And I listen. And I would say most nurses are. They're naturally empathetic.
Right.
And that's the good thing about nursing is that they do tell you, teach you to be the advocate and teach you empathy, and as if you're not already empathetic.
Right.
So, right.
At least you're getting the thumbs up that that's okay to use that skill,
Right.
to detach.
So, but as far as doctors go, in my experience, and this is my experience,
Of course.
it's no, and our system is not set up to be productive. And I have lots of doctor friends, and they're just as aggravated at the system as we are as a patient. Yeah. And so, the way, even at the doctor's office, they're set up and they've got 15 minutes. And sometimes it's 7 minutes, literally.
Yes.
This is part of the numbers right. game. I would have to do we can only dedicate 30 minutes to this client or to this patient that needs a pre-assessment test before surgery.
Right.
The same thing. It was like a doctor's office. So we had this dedicated time, and anesthesiologists running in and out of the room. There's not time.
Right.
There simply just isn't time. So when you go to the doctor or when you go to a surgeon or whatever, being concise, having somebody there with you.
Yes.
2 brains, 2 minds, 2 mouths are better than one.
100%.
Yeah. And so, no, and I have certainly witnessed patients not being listened to, and that was another part that I think just broke my soul. I would just be like, they're not what? You didn't even hear the important part. And so, and I would get sucked into that, and I would overstay. I've gotten in trouble for spending too much time with patients.
Oh, wow.
Literally. Yes. And I'm not the only one. I mean, that's common, and it's sad. That's sad.
Right.
So, I have not been listened to plenty of times myself. Oh my gosh. If you want to talk a thyroid, thyroid. Oh, your numbers are normal. There's nothing wrong with you. I can't get up, and I'm out of bed, and I'm gaining all this weight, and I have this brain fog, so it happens.
Symptoms would lead me to believe otherwise.
But my body says otherwise.
Yes.
Yes, I know
Yeah, I had a similar experience with being on thyroid medication and having an endocrinologist wanting to lower the dosage, and she had already lowered it somewhat, and I was having to take a nap every day, and she said, oh, well, it still looks too high, we need to lower it. And I said, well, this fatigue started maybe about 4 to 6 weeks ago when you decreased my dose the last time, or when the other doctor decreased my dose. And she said, well, it couldn't possibly be that. I was like, I think it is that, 1 + 1 = 2 in this.
Some things are just black and white. But so in that, what gets me is, when you have lab work done, and they're like, oh, well, you're within normal limits, that range. And how that range is based on this huge population of people.
Based on old, young, men, women,
right. It's the
all health conditions.
Yeah, I don't even. Yeah, it's oh gosh, don't get me started on that one. But that I'm not that. I'm me. And you are you. Yes. And our metabolism, our bodies are so different that I know that there has to be a baseline. I'm not that delusional, to think that, but there's a lot to be said around that too.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure that's a big topic we could go on and on about as well. But yeah, the basic part of that is, it's such a huge range that doesn't take into account anything. And
so not being heard, with your symptoms, and when you have all the symptomology and your labs aren't reflecting it, it's so frustrating on both ends, honestly. I will say, on both ends, but the doctors don't have the time. It's time management. It's the way that the system is set up. Is set up to, it's numbers. It's a numbers game.
Yep. They have so many people they have to see, and certain, and
they only have I have one doctor friend, and he was talking about this, and he's so stressed out, watching them come home, and just hearing their after work talk. They're so burnt out. That is a big thing. Yes. Doctor burnout is a very big thing. And then I have another doctor friend, and she reaches out to me and talking about like doing the alternative thing, and she's been trained. I think, Lynn, I do think that things are changing. I see it.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
agree. I mean, like I was sharing with you before, there's a doctor that reached out to me and had me on his podcast, and he's
I
very
love that.
open to,
Mm-hmm.
some alternative things, which is awesome. Like there's
Absolutely.
conversations starting to happen.
And they are. And so they're just as frustrated as we are about that. Not all of them. I mean, there's some that are, I mean, there's compassion fatigue, I mean, they get compassion fatigue, just like therapists and anybody, any other medical professional, even a coach, I mean, there's compassion fatigue.
Right.
That's one thing. So that's the importance of self-care, no matter where you are.
Yes.
No matter what end of the spectrum you're on, no matter what your job is or anything like that. So, but yeah, I've been on both sides of that equation there.
Yeah. So other than, having kind of a clear plan and bringing someone with you, what else do you have any other suggestions for people when they're in that situation of really wanting to make sure they're heard?
Notes, take notes. I would always go, like if I had a lot of questions, I would always write them out before I went.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would, because you only have this time, like you've got 5 minutes, So so I would suggest like writing down your questions, even making a list of your medications and always having them. Now I feel like I'm putting my nurse hat back on, and that's fine because people really do need to do this.
No,
Write down your medications, leave them in your purse or your wallet, whatever. That will help speed things up because they're always like checking your meds, like has anything changed kind of thing. So thinking about your time and their time too will help you hopefully navigate. And two, like there's that certain aspect about, you being your own advocate. And if they're not listening to you, then sometimes, I mean, I've had to get downright mouthy.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's one of the things I always am passionate about saying is, you have the right to keep speaking up. And
oh yes.
And if
you have to, I mean, this is how the healthcare system is now. It's now to the point that you have to, and I think about people who can't even like speak up for themselves,
which is really hard.
I know. And if you can, like, if you have a voice, use it.
Yes.
If you have to. That's.
And no, you can fire doctors.
Fire, like, so yeah. You do.
And remember, you can fire doctors if you need to. I have definitely done that at times when it's like apparent that somebody will not listen, like that endocrinologist who just kept insisting, no, I'm going to lower your medication, and not listening to what I was reporting of my experience of what that was like for me. It was like, okay, I won't be coming back to see you again.
I had the same experience with the thyroid thing, and I fired her. I was like, that's enough. I've seen you for years, and you're not
listening. You're not. Yeah. And there's I think the difference between those who are trying to listen and they're limited by the system and time and things like that, and then those who just are like flat out just dismissing what you're telling them as not important. And to me, that's the big red flag of like, if you don't listen, and that was a big part of my story with the first hematologist who was treating me. He would always ask me how I felt at every appointment. And I always was responding with like, I don't feel well, like with whatever I was dealing with, which not good feedback basically. And he would dismiss that every single time with, well, you look good. And I was like, how is that
going back to that? Well, you don't look sick.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about
and I was like, and that was actually bullshit to say that I looked good, because I had people telling me that they were concerned that I was losing weight.
Oh, wow. So you knew.
I knew that I didn't even look good. It was just like his way of like brushing the subject off. Mm-hmm. And,
and I think about that a lot, especially with chronic illness. And I just have to say it, like, chronic illness is complex.
Yes.
And so think about that when you're going to the doctor, and even if you're going to a specialist that specializes in whatever you're dealing with, I mean, it's still complex. And sometimes it's like they get that compassion fatigue and they're like, oh my God, I've got to deal with this other, like now we're going here. You know what I'm saying? So it's
right. And this was a case of a bad doctor too. Like he was one I should have fired.
Yeah. And some of them are just true assholes. I don't know I can't say it any other way. Just other than that. You can take that part out if you need to.
It's okay. It's true. We sometimes have to say that's, the reality of it. Like some of them are not in it for the right reasons. They're not really listening and caring, or maybe they should have retired 10 years ago.
Or maybe they just need a vacation, like literally for maybe a month. Give yourself a month off.
Yeah. And come back to it, where are you with this now? Like, can you come back and truly show up in the way that you wanted to show up for your patients when you first became a doctor? Or is it
exactly
hang up
when you had that beginner's mind, and really wanted to, and we're in it for the right reasons and to really help people heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh gosh. This conversation could go in a million. I mean, there's
so many things.
Yes.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up, let's give some people some ideas of things that maybe from your perspective are really important that they can do, simple things that they can do to start either changing their mindset or do to support the nurturing of kind of their own health in this way.
So, I really had to do a lot of mindset work. I did. And I remember, and it just hit me one day, and I don't know how or what, but I just knew, and I had been I pray all the time. And, I feel like I'm a walking prayer at this point. And I remember just having the ultimate awareness that I did not have to be cured to be healed.
Beautiful.
And that is a deep, deep knowing for me at this point in my life, and that was after unpacking all of that stuff. But I think that just understanding that if you it is about your mind. For me, it's about my mindset and about how I can not only do things to help my mindset and be around people that can encourage me and support me and all that. And not everybody has that, that luxury.
Right.
It is a luxury for some people. And I'm very thankful for that I do have a really good support system. And if you don't have a good support system, there are so many groups out there, like I said, about, just finding that.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, on Instagram, met some amazing people. Actually was on a podcast about type 1 diabetes, and with great response. And so, but finding support in a community, even going to meetings, to talk with other people who live with chronic illnesses, and maybe even one specific to you, to your diagnosis, or what the doctors have told you that you have.
You can say your diagnosis. The title of the show is the part of it not being your identity. I mean,
Yeah. But yes, and that is the thing, is not like letting it truly identify who I am. And I think me, doing some things that felt like, what, let me just see. I've really learned to replace, and this is interesting, is to replace the word, I, like when I say I can't do something, instead replacing it with I won't, and seeing if that's true for me.
Interesting.
And sometimes it's that I can't just simply means I won't, because I don't want to get out of my comfort zone, or I don't want to eat the salad. I would rather go eat the cheeseburger. So, I'm just throwing out examples, but the thing is really working on your mind and I would say be as active as you can without, overdoing it. And a lot of times when I've talked to clients that were, you know, in I've worked with a lot of people that had adrenal fatigue and hypothyroidism, basically. And, you know, some of them, they couldn't even walk like to their mailbox.
Yeah.
And that would be one of my assignments, I guess you could say, for them, is like, just go try to walk to the end of the driveway or maybe to the mailbox. But always like keeping some movement in your body. Yes. Even if it's like getting those resistance bands. Do you know what I'm talking about? The resistance
They're like kind of like stretchy, rubber bandy things, kind of.
I love those things. Like there's been times, especially when I was in full-blown adrenal fatigue, and I would just sit down on the couch and I was like, at least I'm moving something.
Right.
You know,
working a little muscle with that.
Yes, because keeping your muscles helps keep your bones strong and things like that too. So those weight-bearing kind of exercises. So like light weights, like if you don't have a resistance band, like getting like even just 2-pound weights and doing like little leg lifts if you're bedridden or like even like chair ridden, and like chair yoga and things like that. So of course I'm more mobile than that, but there are people that are in that way. And so I think just introducing, you know, well, I know there are, I don't know why I said I think there are plenty of people that are that way. And then water is huge.
Yes.
Drinking, I always tell my clients to drink half their body weight in fluid ounces of water a day. And that would depend on, you know, if you don't have any kidney problems and things like that. And then
maybe building up to it too. Like if you don't drink a lot of water, that probably in the beginning is gonna
they're always like, wait, I'll be in the bathroom all day. And I'm like, your body will get used to it. But Waitland, yeah, you do have to build up to that, definitely. And breathing. I tell you, and I think I was going to say something about this before and kind of got off track, but you know, all those years being a nurse, running, like I would be working 12 to 14 hours and like feel like I ran a marathon by the time I'd gotten home. And so, and I was always like, my shoulders were up to my ears and I was just like constricted all the time. Yes. Not breathing. And so when I remember like when going through yoga teacher training, the biggest impact was the breath.
Yes, I find that too. I mean, I have a form of breath work I use with clients.
Oh, awesome.
That's so powerful because I always like to say too, it's a tool that doesn't require like any equipment, like you can do it anywhere, you know, it's like wherever you are, you know, you can
breathe. And that's, again, that goes back to that alkalinity piece. Like you can breathe yourself alkaline. You can breathe yourself like hyperventilate too. So, but you know, get a breathing practice because that's going to calm down your nervous system. And with any chronic illness, you know just as well as I do, the nervous system, and because of the stress that induces, breathing.
Yeah, we don't heal when we're in fight or flight. Our body doesn't go into that mode of doing repair and healing. And so the
rest and digest.
Yes, get yourself into parasympathetic as much as you can, you know. Right. And breathing is a great way to get there. So I'm
and it's really like treating your whole. It is that trinity. I want to say the mind, body, spirit, and nurture your soul too. You know, and whatever that means for you.
Yes.
In whatever capacity that means for you, but taking care of your body and your mind. That's been.
Mindset is so huge. And I think it's, you know, something obviously that, as we talked about at the beginning, it's not considered really. And when you're given a diagnosis, when you're treated under Western medicine, the mindset piece is just not something.
That is nothing. No, there's no, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the words that we say, the thoughts that we think, all of that influences our body in profound ways. So coming back to that and just beginning to look at your thoughts is powerful.
Yes. And that's why I'm just so thankful that there are people out there, like-minded sisters like you that are doing this work. It's so important.
It is
And
important work, and it's important that, we create a new movement of what we want in healthcare versus kind of this old paradigm, because most of us know it's broken and it's not working and it's not helping us, but we need to also find the way to have alternatives and have that available to people and accepted.
Yep. If we could just get into like prevention mode. And so start thinking prevention. If I could leave with anything, it's like start thinking about prevention.
Yes. Yeah. So even if if you're listening and you're not someone who's dealing with chronic illness, or maybe you're listening because someone is dealing with this, but remember, like, you also have to look at that prevention aspect for yourself as well, because it's much easier to heal something when it's just starting than when it's the big scary thing.
Yes. So yes.
Don't neglect it and put it off and say, I'm too busy, because too busy is a bad excuse.
It is.
You're going to regret it later.
I've used it a million times, but it is a very bad excuse. Yes.
It's a common one, but it's one that's, it's dangerous, because how much is it going to cost you later in terms of time, energy, money, health? Yeah.
You don't think about money. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I think it was a very valuable thing for listeners to hear your story and a little bit of the perspective from kind of someone who's lived in kind of both of these realms of the Western system, and now kind of stepping out and being part of this movement of creating something new and a new paradigm.
Yeah, I like to use the hashtag doing healthcare differently.
I like it. Let's use that one.
Hashtag that. Yes.
I love it. We'll make sure to put that one in when we share the show out.
Absolutely.
Great hashtag. Wonderful. Well, thank you for taking your time to share with the community.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Lynn. I've enjoyed all of our conversations.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Until next time.